Hello, I'm Cosmic, and welcome to the latest addition to the Wolfenstein franchise, Wolfenstein The New Order. This new sequel to the much beloved FPS franchise has been developed by Machine Games, who are a Swedish developer formed in 2009, and they hold experienced developers who worked on both the Riddick and the Darkness video games. So finally we are back in the shoes of the Nazi killing machine that is William B.J. Blazkowicz. Those familiar with the previous Wolfenstein titles will know that Blazkowicz is the reoccurring main protagonist, and once again you're pitted against General William Strauss, more commonly known as General Death's Head. The New Order takes place in an alternate reality of 1960, where the Nazis somehow found advanced technology that allowed them to win World War II, and thus take over the world. Blazkowicz was injured in 1946 at an assault on Death's Head's compound, and he spends 14 years in a Polish mental hospital. Once he awakens, he sets off to find the resistance and take the fight back to the new Nazi world regime. So let's dive into the core of the title and what it's all about, which is gunplay. After all, it's a first-person shooter. Now, Wolfenstein, as a general rule, has never took itself particularly seriously, and it's more about arcade action and having fun and killing as many Nazis as possible than it is about having real gunplay and real simulation. For example, you can dual wield two automatic shotguns, not particularly realistic. But all in all, the gunplay is actually pretty good. It is a bit of a mixed bag in terms of feedback, as the feedback isn't always the greatest, and it's difficult to tell sometimes if you're actually doing any damage at all to an enemy. But overall, the weapon variety as well is absolutely fantastic. You have it ranges from things like your assault rifle to futuristic laser weaponry. The amount of weapons available to you and the amount of especially dual wielding weapons is actually really good, and dual wielding automatic shotguns, as I've said, is probably the most fun I've had in a first person shooter in quite a while, especially when you've got a corridor of Nazis in front of you and you just charge in with your two dual wielding shotguns and just unleash around 60 rounds per second. It is absolutely fantastic. Wolfenstein also boasts a semblance of a stealth system. Now, it's a very limited and basic stealth system, although it's a clear nod to games like Dishonored, where it's actually about crouching, crawling up to an enemy and just pressing one key to do a takedown. It is actually particularly useful in the game, especially against the Nazi commanders, because Nazi commanders actually have the ability to call in reinforcements if you're discovered. So it's often best to enter a level, kill the Nazi commanders stealthily, and then blast your way through everyone else. Wolfenstein's health system in the game is actually particularly interesting. Now, you have health and armor. Now, obviously, armor deteriorates first when you get hit, and then your health deteriorates. The health system in particular is quite curious in the way that it works. For example, once you have, say you have 100 health and you are at full health, if you then pick up a med pack at that point, say that adds an additional 50 health, your health system will go into overcharge. And what it will mean is that you will then have 150 health, and it will be overcharged, and that will slowly decline back to the normal 100 over a period of time. What this gives you the ability to do is, before any combat situation, you can overcharge your health as much as possible and then go through and absorb twice the normal damage that you would be able to do. There is limited health regeneration once you're at normal health. It goes in tens, so that, for example, if you end up actually getting hit and you go down to 65, at that point it will regenerate to 70. If you get down to 45 or 44, it will go regenerate up back to 50. So it blocks of 10 basically. It's an interesting system. It means that you can prepare for skirmishes in advance, but it also means that you can end up wasting health packs in advance by overcharging your health too much, and then when you actually need them, there isn't that many around. So let's talk about level design. So level design isn't bad in the game, and it is very linear. There's not much exploration to be had. If you're expecting a maze shooter, you're not going to get it. But overall, the levels are quite big, they're quite nice. Some of them are very pretty to look at, although the overall graphical fidelity of the game isn't that impressive in terms of next generation games. Some of the texture qualities are lacking in some areas, but the main areas and for major set pieces of the game, it is actually a very pretty game to look at. Character models especially are particularly good. The actual level design, the way it works once you're actually in the game, is that you often go back to your Resistance headquarters before you head out on another mission. Again, similar to Dishonored, in the way that you actually go back to your Resistance headquarters and then you can do side quests there as well and talk to people, like in Dishonored. And it just amuses me that it is quite like Dishonored in that way, but that's pretty much where the similarity ends. As I've said, character animations are particularly good. The voice acting in the game isn't bad either. There are some characters that are very good voice acted, but some of them are, you think, well, that could be here or there, it doesn't really matter. But the character animations and the voice acting together does provide an immersive experience, which brings me on to the story. Now, I am always one for story, and I actually thought that Wolfenstein's story was absolutely fantastic. As first-person shooters go, it has a great storyline. Though the actual gameplay may not take itself particularly seriously, the story does. You meet some very interesting, well-thought-out characters. You really do care about those characters that you get in the Resistance. You also find that you actually, especially as the storyline progresses and you see the cruelty of the Nazi characters, you actually start wondering what life would have been like if Nazis had have won World War II. And it does make you think and kind of appreciate aren't we glad that we won World War II? And it's a very good storyline. It's very well told. It's very well paced. It's not too long, not too short. As first-person shooters go, it took me around, on normal difficulty, took me around 10 hours to complete my first playthrough, and I did die quite a few times on a couple of the boss battles, but it wasn't particularly difficult. The enemy AI is, I would say, my biggest problem with the game, in the fact that the AI is just absolutely terrible. More often than not, I died out of my sheer owning competence rather than because the enemy was better than me. I died because I made stupid decisions, or I did something that it was my fault, basically. I was to blame, not the enemy. The enemy AI is quite dumb. For example, especially with the stealth system, although it works, sometimes it works too well, and I actually could just go face to face with a hound dog, and like literally it would have saw me in any other game, but in this game it didn't, and I could just sneak round and just kill it without it even seeing me, and it was just ridiculous. And the AI in general isn't particularly smart, and especially even in combat situations, it's easy to outmaneuver enemies. You're faster, you're smarter than them. Particularly in your movement, you are always faster than your enemy in the game, which is useful against tougher enemies, especially enemies that have armor or robots or anything like that. One thing I did like about the game is I have the ability to sprint, I have the ability to jump, and I also have the ability to sprint slide, which reminds me, it's very reminiscent of Bulletstorm. For those who played Bulletstorm, it's very fun to sprint up to an enemy, slide, and fire off while you're sliding towards an enemy. That moment is fantastic, and I have to say, props to Machine Games for that, because that was a very fun experience. The game also has perks. The perks aren't particularly, although they are useful, they're not particularly difficult to get. You just have to meet a certain amount of requirements, which most of them can be achieved through normal gameplay. It's not particularly difficult to get them. They are useful, but you know, it's not the best perk system I've ever seen in an FPS. It's very limited, very basic, and it's nothing, you know, new or particularly exciting. It's just your bog standard stuff. Overall, I have to say that I enjoyed Wolfenstein immensely. I think it captures the series very well. I think it's a very well told story that is worth playing through. One thing that I do have to mention about the story is that very early on in the game, you have a choice to make whether to let someone live or die. Depending on that choice, things will happen differently in the game. Not in a major way, that it will still play out the very same way, but who you have with you will be different, and some of the cutscenes will be different, which is it's nice in terms of its longevity and replayability. But as I say, it does have its problems overall. The game, you know, especially with the AI, and it's very linear. The stealth system's very basic. The perk system's very basic. The gunplay is a little silly sometimes, but it is fun, and that's what's important. It's a fun game. If you're looking for a simulation shooter, look elsewhere. But if you're looking for a fun arcadey, well-told story FPS, then Wolfenstein is going to be right up your alley, and especially if you're a fan of the franchise, it is a very, very good iteration of the series. And that's Wolfenstein The New Order. Thank you very much for watching. Do like, subscribe, and leave a comment, and I will see you next time.